What's going on, trading card game players? Figs here with Figs4. I'm bringing you guys my Branded Despia deck profile. So I went and played at a PS5 tournament at Millennium Games, and I was able to get top 4. I went undefeated in Swiss, only took a loss to a player that I beat in Swiss in top 4. Unfortunately, my deck just didn't perform the way that I wanted it to, but I had a blast with the deck. The deck has been very good. I've been playing it competitively over Phantom Knights because I wanted to make sure that I can compete for the format. So I have been playing Branded Despia. It's more like Branded Puppet, but it's pretty much how I'm playing the deck, but we'll go ahead and showcase to you guys my formula and my take on the deck. Again, I had a blast playing the deck. It's very good, very solid. The new support is actually pretty insane. Quem is just a super strong card. I actually got pretty fortunate with my prizing with the tournament. I actually ended up pulling a Starlight Quem, so I get to flex a little bit with the deck. But yeah, let's go ahead and let me showcase for you guys the deck. Go over my take, of course, on why I play certain things. And if you guys have any suggestions on transformations we can make to the deck, of course, to make it better, feel free to jump in the comment section below. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the profile here. So we'll go ahead and get started with some of the branded cards. I guess it's kind of in particular order, but guess not. 3 branded fusion, 3 branded opening, 3 fusion deployment, 1 branded in red, 1 white, and 1 lost. So this is what I played for the more fusion type cards. 3 branded fusion standard. Opening is very standard and honestly probably one of the better cards now that we have Quem. I love using this to get Quem. It's just a great interaction because of the fact that it dumps and sets you up for different cards and combos. Fusion deployment is still a very important card because of course we are trying to push out Cartesia. We're trying to push out Fallen Albaz as interruption. Branded in red. Branded in white is actually a card that I wasn't playing for the longest time prior to Quem and the new support. I think the card actually got a lot better just because of the fact that you can use Quem to dump Fallen of Albaz. So if you don't use Quem as a way to interact with your opponent by bringing back Fallen Albaz, you can actually use it as an additional extender. So it is very good. And then of course, Branded Lost is just utterly insane. It just does way too much for a continuous spell. Again, not being able to allow your opponent to interact is pretty nuts. So 1 expulsion, 1 retribution. What retribution actually is very, very good. I'm surprised a lot of people don't use it for its actually onboard effect. I tend to not dump it right away. I normally go for either opening or Fallen Albaz when I use Quem, just because of the fact that, again, you're setting up additional interruptions for your opponent's turn. And then also you're setting yourself up for protection. But this also does a lot in this format because of the fact that it does negate summoning abilities. It does allow you to be able to have additional interruption while also being able to recycle resources. And a lot of people, they play Nadir Servant, so you would think that this would be something that would be played a little bit more often, considering you can dump a lot of different names. But yeah, I think this card is obviously very strong for what it does for both on-field and grave. It did allow me to win one of my matches where I was able to stop my opponent from summoning Cartesia, and then was able to next turn get a Branded Fusion back to hand. Expulsion is really good because of course we're using it for Puppet, but it also allows you to recycle your Quem as well as your Cartesia. And I think the most broken thing about this compared to the Sanctifier Dragon, Albion, is that you're able to put both the monsters on your side of the board. So being able to put Quem and Cartesia on your side of the board is actually pretty nuts, especially for follow-up, because if your opponent is able to interact with your board and deal with a lot of your interruptions, you're able to basically just set up a whole new board. You have your Mirror Jade, use Mirror Jade's effect. They try to out it. You go ahead and expulsion, get rid of it, bring back your Quem and your Cartesia. Use Cartesia to fuse with a guy in hand or field, and then Quem just brings back Mirror Jade. So just so much interruption and so much interaction and recursion that your opponent just ideally sometimes just can't deal with. So we've got ourselves 3 Fallen Albaz. I would never play anything less than 3. I've always gone back and forth and testing it, but I've never actually ran the deck with it at 2. I think 3 is always the most ideal number. The card's absolutely insane. Normal summoning it, fusion deployment, bringing it back off of Quem, it being the Fallen Albaz name is very important for a lot of your combos. So I definitely think 3 was the most ideal way, of course, to play the Fallen Albaz. And again, with Quem running around, it's just too good. 2 Blazing Cartesia, cards absolutely insane as well. Fusioning from hand and field during either player's turn gives you so much advantage, and is the reason why Quem as well is broken, is because of the fact that you're pulling guys out of your extra deck because you're making dudes, which allows you to just get additional resources. Then of course, playing 2 is good because you want to see this in our opening because of course we're playing Puppet. So getting the Dust Dragon is very important. So we're of course playing the 2, 1 kit, 1 Mercurier, and 1 Albion. I'm not too fond of the kit. I do like the kit because of the fusion that goes along with it, Iron Dash. I think that fusion is actually very, very strong. But otherwise, he didn't really come up too much. She didn't really come up too much for what I really wanted it to do. But unfortunately, I don't know if I would cut it. I think I would keep it because it is a consistency card. It is basically an Aliber in terms of what you're getting, but also it allows you to loop a lot of your extra deck or your extra cards. So like your branded fusion, your branded expulsion, your retribution. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I'll keep it in. I might test around with maybe taking it out, but I definitely want to continue to play the Iron Dash. So I feel like if I'm playing that, I want to have more than one option than just Fallen Albaz, and obviously this is the other target for it. One Mercurier, one Albion. Of course, we play the one Albion because Albion does what it does. And Mercurier, I mean, I know that's one that usually people flex between two or one, but I honestly didn't want to play it at more than one because you usually don't want to see it in my combo. Of course, you're just trying to get it off branded fusion, stop one monster effect if your opponent tries to interact with you attempting to summon puppet, and then they basically scoop. So you're not really too worried about having more than one copy. 3 Aliber, the 1 Quem. Cards, again, utterly insane. Cards just does way too much. Tragedy, and then ad lib. So yeah, this is what we went for the Despian package. Of course, you know, we're playing this as it is. I wish I could play more than 1 Quem. It's not a great normal summon, unfortunately. It can be, depending on if you have, like, you know, fusion deployment, if you have a Cartesia in hand. Because technically, you know, she sets you up for Cartesia to be playable, and then you can summon Cartesia, fuse with something else from hand, and then, you know, make your plays. But I definitely think that this is just best as a one-of. You have so many ways of being able to get it out of the grave. Ad libitum can actually bring it back. You've got fusions that are able to get it out of the deck. You have, you know, traps are able to bring it out of the graveyard. So there's just a lot of options for its own recursion anyways. And if it gets banished, you can put it right back in the deck with Lebellion. Then our Bestial lineup is just the two, you know, Lebellion and Sornir. We're not playing any other additional Bestials. I'd only play more Bestials if I was playing the Synchro variant, which I had tests for a little while and played for fun. But I definitely don't think it's as competitive as this because we're focused so much on fusions that we have so much recursion on the fusion aspect that it's hard for your opponent, you know, to really deal with the type of recursion that you have. And all the fusion monsters that we have in our extra deck deals with almost every ideal situation that we normally wouldn't be able to deal with if we had like synchros and stuff like that. So I definitely do like it a lot. We are playing the Crossout and the 1 Call By. So I opted to do Crossout over Nadir Servant. I do like Nadir Servant. I definitely do think it is a strong card. But with the way that I'm playing the deck is that if I'm going to play Branded Fusion and I want to resolve it to win, this is the only way that's going to allow me to do that. I know Ash is not being played as prevalent as it was before, but Droll is a card as well. So if you have to normal summon Aliber, Nadir Servant ends up being dead. And if you normal summon the Aliber, get Drolled, and then you get Ash in the same regard, you pretty much lose the game. I mean, you're going to pass with no other interaction or nothing else you're able to do. So it feels really bad. Crossout Designator at least allows you to be able to never lose a Droll because your only summon prior to a draw or after a draw phase is going to be Aliber normal summon. So ideally, you're never really going to lose the Droll. Your combo for Branded Fusion never searches anything unless you're sending Tragedy. And then, of course, because we are playing Quem, like you're always going to be sending Cartesia or Lebellion to set up Branded Laws and to get back Cartesia off of Quem. So I think Crossout Designator is the better option for being able to ensure that you play the game. It didn't come up as much as I wanted it to on Saturday. I think I only Crossout Designator maybe once or twice. But it is nice also to have in the mirror because of Puppet. These are basically your outs to being able to stop you, your opponent from stopping you from playing the game. So it's nice to have these options, but you know, nonetheless, I think that this is just better in terms of being safe when you're playing the deck. Because again, Nadir Servant is very nice, and I think it's a very strong card for playing past Ash. But we don't want to play past Ash. We want to play through Ash, and we want to actually be able to continue to play the game. Whereas Nadir Servant just kind of, you know, sets you up for the following turn. We've got the 1 Ash Blossom for the Crossout. We've got ourselves 3 Dark Kaijus. I went with the Kaijus in the main because I wanted to make sure I had main board outs to all the new decks in the format. For Purely, Super Heavy Samurai, you know, we want to make sure that we have answers to those because unfortunately Super Heavy Samurai can end on Spell Canceller. And then of course Purely just ends on a Towers. So this outs just all of that. And then of course we went with the Dark one so that Fallen of Albaz can fuse with it to make Lebellion. Then we've got here our 3 Droll and Logbird. So obviously Droll and Logbird's insane in this format. It's ideally a floodgate, stopping most decks from being able to play all in all. And like I said, it doesn't hurt our deck very much, so I never used it as a crossout target, never had it a cross out. Most of the time my opponent dropped Droll, I just shrugged and kept playing. And then of course the 1 Puppet. So, you know, obviously Puppet's a very strong card, and you know, I'm hoping Konami at least hits it at some point. So let's go ahead and get into the extra deck. We've got 2 Mirror Jade. The main board was 42 cards, so we did go 42. None of the Foolish Burial and the Gold Sark. I'm not a fan of those because again, they do initiate losing to Droll. And then of course, I know they're consistency cards, but I'd much rather have engine cards. And when you're playing multiple copies of things like Cartesia, you know, and the Branded in White and the different cards that allow you to basically play the game, you know, you don't really need to search for a specific card when all of your cards kind of do what they're supposed to do. 2 Mirror Jade, 2 Albion, 1 Lubellion. The Iron Dash, again, I love this card over Glory. I think this is much better. Glory is the one that searches Mercurier. This one is much, much better in my opinion, just because of the fact that you're able to fuse with actually an effect monster that will special summon this turn. So, you know, Quem, when you go to a simplified game state and Quem is the only thing you have on board, as soon as your opponent decides to special summon a monster from the extra deck or a card is removed from the extra deck in general, Quem is able to bring back Fallen Albaz, and you're able to make Sprint, or you're able to make the Mirror Jade. The biggest thing is that you get to pick and choose ideally. So if your opponent is starting to set up their board, let's say they pull out a monster from the extra deck that just you don't want to eliminate, but you know eliminating something else on the board that was special that turn would actually stop them from playing the game, then you're able to pretty much just take it and make a sprint out of it. So it kind of gives you options to flex in terms of how you want to interact with your opponent. And I think that's the biggest thing about this deck is if you're a control player, which I am, you're able to pretty much set up your board and break a board, kind of like how Phantom Knights do. And I think that was very important to me. I wanted to make sure that I had options that if I'm going to be playing 3 Fallen Albaz, I have as many targets and options as possible to make whatever it is I need. So it's definitely very good. You know, another big thing too that I like to do is that you can, especially with the Kaiju on your opponent's side of the field, Fallen Albaz for Sprint to out a back row card or a Floodgate, which is really nice. So this card has a lot of applications. It's very good. Ridrum, 1 Sanctifier Dragon, really nutty card. Again, being able to just bring back Quem, being able to bring back Cartesia, being able to revive fusions as well. Very strong, very, very strong card. And then we have 2 Dust Dragon. As I said, we're focused on Puppet, but we're also focused on being able to utilize the strength of the fusion cards in our extra deck. So I wanted to make sure that I had the ability to dump everything and anything I needed at any time. So the biggest thing was that obviously we want to go for the dumps of like Albion. We want to go ahead and go for like the Synchro, the Lulu. We want to be able to dump Puppet. We want to be able to dump Adlib so that we have our recursion set up for later turns. Playing 2 of this is important because, of course, we summon 1 during our turn, and if we need to summon another during our opponent's with the recursion that we have, then we have the option to do so. Also, it can tag out into Lulu or the Despian Corteris that we're playing, which is basically the 2 targets that we're playing that are Despias in our extra deck. This card is actually really nuts. Its end of turn effect just is really great. I mean, if you're able to dump it and you don't have a Cartesia, your opponent somehow outed your Cartesia, or you don't have Quem, this gets you there. And then of course Corteris is really good because it does actually get you a Despia as well, which gets you Quem. I mean you'll notice the focus here. The focus is quite heavily on Quem because that card just does so much, and people don't realize is that if Quem sits on the board for longer than a turn, you pretty much almost lost the game because of the fact that it's going to get so much recursion, and it's going to get a body that basically outs just about any board, which Mirror Jade pretty much does. So yeah, I mean, and plus also this allows you to OTK. If you're playing into a board that doesn't play fusions, you can just summon this, make everything 0 and OTK your opponent, which is really nice. Or even when you do Dark Ruler, you just summon all your dudes. So you don't have to use your effects. You just summon the Dark Ruler, summon all your dudes, Corteris, make them all 0, swing over everything, and then you have all your effects live for next turn. 1 Guardian Chimera, 1 Yugioh Stapelia. So ideally kind of like our branded in red targets, or ideally, you know, he's more or less for like Cartesia, for when you want to swap out to get a Mirror Jade back, which is kind of the biggest plays that I like to do with it as well. It's like you'll have Mirror Jade with Quem and Cartesia on board, and then you'll go ahead and like use Mirror Jade's effect, use Cartesia, you know, and her make Yugioh Stapelia, and then Quem bring back Mirror Jade, so you have 2 additional interruptions. So it's nice to be able to cycle those cards out because you just don't lose the floodgates, and that's why I like this deck a lot. You don't lose the Dark Ruler no more. You don't lose the Kaijus. It's very hard to lose any of those cards just because of the fact that you're never ending your board on just 1 body. And most of the time, even if you do, if your opponent can't OTK you, Mirror Jade just wipes the board and starts all over. Then we have the last card in my extra deck is the Borreload Furious Dragon. This card was actually pretty nuts. For anyone who doesn't know what it does, it's a quick effect. You can target 1 monster you control and 1 card your opponent controls to destroy them. So basically, it's a quick effect pop. You can protect your fusion monsters with branded openings and still destroy the target that you targeted on your opponent's side of the field. So yeah, it's actually really strong. It's actually won me quite a few games just because of the fact that as you're building a board, you're breaking it. So you're able to like summon everything, attack with something, use his effect, pop with a card that you already swung with, or you can, you know, attempt to destroy himself, destroy a card in the field, branded opening, protect it, and then next turn, you know, do it again. So it helps you clear the board. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is against a lot of these decks like Cash, Purely, Super Heavy Samurai, they leave cards on the board that you don't want to leave on the board for the next turn. So like they have cards in their pendulum zones, or they'll have the continuous spell for purely, or they'll have birth for cash. So this allows you to out those cards and basically be able to clear your opponent's board at the same time, because he's a 3000 attacker and he only requires 2 Dark Dragons, which is actually very easy. You can use Branded Fusion or any of your fusion monsters to make them by sending Fallen Elbaz, double Fallen Elbaz, Fallen Elbaz, and the Shrouded Dragon. I think it's Albion. I don't know how I forgot his name just now. Yeah, Albion the Shrouded Dragon. And then you can also send, your Soronir. So you definitely have options of being able to send 2 Dark Dragons, or again, even banishing and bouncing with the different fusions that we have in our extra deck. So that was it for the extra deck. We'll go ahead and get into the sideboard. Definitely want to share the sideboard with you guys. Since it is a new format, it was definitely nice to have different ideas and how we wanted to go ahead and side for the meta. So we got 3 Dark Ruler No More. This card was actually pretty nuts. Of course, it just stops Sprite, stops Super Heavy Samurai, stops all the wide boards that your opponent has that pretty much ends on a bunch of Omnis. I did do Dimensional Shifter, which actually was a very good card. A lot of people did not expect, especially Branded, to be siding it. As you notice, I don't really play the deck with the idea that the graveyard's super important. Yes, Quem's Recursion is very important, but when you're focusing, when you know that you're going to be playing D-Shifter, you kind of change your game plan, especially when you're playing against the mirror. Your opponent ends up putting in Bestials, and they are playing the Deer Servant, so this just turns a lot of cards off. And then, of course, if they do like Branded Opening, you just wait. You don't want them to know what you're going to go into, because if they do summon Quem and they activate Quem, then you just change Shifter. Same idea. As soon as they activate Branded Fusion, you just do Shifter, and then they're not able to puppet you. So you're able to pretty much play on your next turn. Their Mirror Jade's dead, so the only thing they can normally go into, especially if they're playing Dragoon, is to go into Dragoon, and then you just put a Kaiju on it, or you just Branded Lost, summon Fallen Elbaz, or you bait the negate and then Fallen Elbaz, then you have your Mirror Jade live for the next turn. So that was the biggest thing, is that this interacts with that kind of matchup, but also Super Heavy Samurai, purely. This card's gonna be a very good floodgate hand trap going into the next format, or this format. So yeah, definitely was a needed card. Pinkertops, another insane card, climbs over just about anything in most matchups, and then also pops a card with no repercussion, because it's hard to deal with since the fact that it tributes for cost. But it is meant to out floodgates. If your opponent has a spell canceller, you can special swing over it without your opponent being able to interrupt you, and then you get the pop a card or bait an Omni. It also gets rid of the Secret Spellcaster Village field card that stops you from activating spells. I know we play spellcasters, but it's nice to still be able to interact where you can swing over your opponent's spellcaster. They try to stop you, and then you just blow up the spell card, the field card. But yeah, very, very strong in my opinion. I think he's definitely going to see a lot more play, especially for me. I enjoyed it a lot. 3 Cosmic Cyclone, mainly for anti-spell. We don't really care about a lot of other floodgates. This is pretty much the only one we care about is anti-spell, because obviously we can't play the game. So I respect it, and I play the 3 Cosmic Cyclone. The 1 Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician. Obviously, this is for Super Heavy Samurai. For those who don't know, you just send it off Branded Fusion, set a card, it goes to your Pendulum Scale, and then it basically acts as a Mystic Mine. If your opponent doesn't have a set card, then they can't play the game. So yeah, very, very good, and you only need the 1. I do one-sided Ghost Bell for the crossout. Bell is like the only card that stops Expulsion, and since people are playing Gamma for the Albion, it's easy to protect him because you can just chain Expulsion, and then if they have the Bell, you just stop the Bell. But yeah, so I do the Bell for crossout for Bell, and then the 3 evenly matched. This is mainly for Cash. I wanted to make sure I respected Cash because I was testing during the week, and I forgot Cash was a deck. I expected everyone to be on new decks, and I ended up losing to Cash at my locals, and I was like, oh, well, let me just go ahead and put it evenly back in because I need that card for Cash, and it won me both games for against my Cash matchup. So yeah, very, very strong card, of course. But yeah, that was the sideboard. So I hope you guys enjoy the profile and explanations. As always, jump in the comment section below. We can go over the transformation and see what we can do to make the deck even better. I'm definitely going to continue to play this deck. I think it's very strong, and I think it is one of the best decks of the format. I just think it's a little underrated. It's not a very easy deck to play. I know a lot of people are just like, oh, just play Branded Fusion. Well, as you can see, I have a lot of different lines and a lot of different tech options, and I think that's the important thing, is that if you're playing it correctly and you're not just playing the deck very linear where you're just playing Dragoon, and it just, you got to have options. And I think that having more options like these are far better, just because, you have the ability to be able to kind of get yourself out of every and any situation. So, but yeah, hope you guys enjoy it. I hope to see everyone at YCS Philly in the next coming weeks. I'll be testing this, and I'll more or less probably be running this as well. So, best of luck to you guys, and hopefully you guys can reciprocate that same energy. But yeah, go ahead and make sure you guys like, subscribe, and show some love to the channel. Appreciate you guys.